Hey, Mark here. I just have a fun announcement for you. So, we recently started doing these Final Fight episodes, and we've been putting them up with the movies, the regular movie, films, and flicks episodes. However, the Final Fight episodes people really loved, so we figured that we would start a brand new podcast just called Final Fights, brought to you by Movies, Films, and Flicks, where it's nothing but final fights in movies, where we discuss every punch, bite, head kick, gut punch, everything you can think about. We do a lot of research, and they're short episodes. They're probably about 20 to 30 minutes. They're really quick to listen to, and they just talk about all your favorite final fights. So head to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and rate, review, and subscribe, and listen to Final Fights. I think you'll really enjoy it. Thank you. Welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who is currently lounging in a frozen lake. It's Isaac Thorne.
Hey, Mark.
So how's it feeling there? How cold is the water? And are you resting the computer on top of the ice and just lounging?
I'm not from Norway, so I'm not accustomed to the cold. In fact, I hate the cold. So right now the laptop is in my lap as I'm on a chair in a heated room far above the water.
Nowhere near that frozen pond, huh?
No way.
The frozen death pond.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was researching that, and I found a website called the Outdoor Swimming Society, and it says how to acclimatize to cold water, and apparently you can do that. So you just get in there more often, you train your body so then you don't get that shock, you don't get the cold shock. So you do as few as like 5 or 6 3-minute immersions, and then you keep doing that. And when your body gets used to it, it stays with you for a while. Like 14 months later, you still react better to the water than people who haven't.
Wow.
And it's pretty interesting where when you do that, it keeps, like, your blood doesn't, like, flow to the outside of your hands and legs and all that. It comes, like, it stays kind of in your core. So it keeps your heart and kind of inside more warm since the blood's pumping there. The downfall is it takes you longer for your hands and legs to get warm because your blood doesn't flood there. But people who aren't used to it, that's where all the blood goes. That's why they have a lot of problems with the respiratory and heart and all those issues.
I guess that makes sense. I can't imagine a reason I would ever want to do that.
No.
But, I guess if I was going to have to, if someone was going to push me into a frozen river, I think I would want, at least a couple months advance notice so I could acclimatize myself.
I'll meet you in 2 months. I knew that frozen lake was going to come into play in this movie,
yes.
Winter People. When he said the thing about the swimming, I'm like, Chekhov's frozen pond, right? Wasn't that Chekhov's gun? Isn't that what they said?
Chekhov's gun, yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And that's one of the things I actually love about Winter People is very nearly everything. And I actually looked for things that were not used when I rewatched it yesterday for the first time in its intended aspect ratio. I actually looked for things that were not reused. And at first I thought Scarlet, that pig. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the pig being anywhere else in the movie. And then they bring that around later on as well. So I couldn't find anything that wasn't a Chekhov's gun.
I mean, so this movie, and I'm really happy, and I guess I should get some plugs in really quick. So we've been going back and forth on Twitter and Facebook for what feels like years now, correct?
Yeah, it's been a while.
And so, do you want to do? I'm terrible at plugs. So as you know, if you're listening, Isaac is and congrats on being nominated for the shortlist on that recent list, correct, for your work? I saw that on your Facebook.
The Indie Reader Award. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm a horror author, primarily short stories. I've written one novel titled The Gordon Place. And that's basically what I do. I write. So.
Well, that sounds like a great life.
Well, it's not primarily fiction. I do have a day job that is technical writing, but it's still writing, so it counts.
That's one thing I need to get better at. I did technical writing for a while, and it drove me insane because I'm so used to my weird data, and the way my brain works is like a pinball machine. So to keep it very, like, to write that specific, really kind of, I need to get better at it. But that was tough to get used to.
I was actually reminded of my day job when we get to the investigation piece in this movie, because those folks on both sides of that river were very technical and detailed in their analysis.
If I ever need some PIs to work a case, I'm hiring the Campbells.
Absolutely.
And so before we jump into this movie too much, I just have a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How long will it take for that massive bear alarm clock built in the center of the town to break down?
That's a good question. It looked like a sturdy built tower. I don't know about the bear himself.
There's so many working parts. When I see so many working parts, so basically Kurt Russell gets stuck in a small town. He stays with a lady. Then he says he'll build this family a massive clock that chimes every hour, and they'll give him a truck because his truck was marauded by the dastardly Campbells in a lake. Wait, I bounce all over the place. I don't care. Why was he trying to cross that river? That thing was uncrossable, wasn't it?
It looked uncrossable, but here's the thing. This is 1934 mountains of North Carolina. Back then, and even still to this day, there are rural roads in the South, at least, that you will occasionally, especially in a wet season, find yourself driving through a stream or even a river. So I can believe him being a city fella.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Not being able to judge the depth there and failing the turn around, don't drown.
When they were talking about the Campbells, all I could think, do you want to sum up this movie real quick before I'm sure people listening have watched this movie, but can you give me a quick synopsis for this movie? That makes sense.
Absolutely.
What do you think it is?
Absolutely. All right. It's a 1989 film directed by Ted, and I'm gonna mess up his last name. It's Ted Kotcheff or Kochev.
Wake and Fright Kochev.
Yes, and he also the director of First Blood.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Is another story.
Weekend at Bernie's.
And Weekend at Bernie's, yeah. And the story is about a widower and his young daughter who are moving, I guess, across country. I can't remember where they started, but I believe they're moving to California, and somehow not somehow, he tries to drive through a river, and they get stranded in the mountains of North Carolina. They come upon a small cabin in which Kelly McGillis's character, Collie, lives by herself with her infant son who has no father, at least that we know about in the beginning. You know, there's some mystery and some secrets there in 1934 sinful mountain life. They stop to rest and warm up, are going to leave the next day, and come to find his car being stripped apart.
Take the engine. That's what someone says that too.
Take the engine.
How are they going to take the engine?
That's a good question. You'd think you'd need a screwdriver or something.
Just grab it. It's like they're talking like it's a bag of chips.
But I believe they turned the thing over too. I mean, I guess it's it's a lightweight car, I guess, compared to modern machinery. But so they end up further stranded, and as Kurt Russell's character Waylon begins to fall for Collie and she for him, he becomes entangled in these family dramas, all while trying to earn. He's a clockmaker, and he tries to earn a truck by building the small village that the Wrights pretty much run a tower clock.
That's great. You did a good job. I would have been all over the place.
Thank you very much.
And so I had such a good time watching this movie, and it led me down some interesting rabbit holes. So the author was John Ely, and this was the seventh novel in his. He wrote this whole series about life in North Carolina, and this was the seventh in that. which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew this was based on his novel, but I had no idea he'd written an entire series.
And so it's the number 5th in his Landbreaker series. And then I learned that he married Rosemary Harris, who I guess most people, she was big on stage, but she was also in the Spider-Man movies as Aunt May.
Oh yeah.
And then they had a daughter, Jennifer Ely, who has a bunch of Tonys and was in some big movies, and she was originally in Game of Thrones as Catelyn Stark. She was in the pilot, but then they had to reshoot it, and she just had a child, and she's like, I'm done with this. So she left, and they recast Michelle Farley to be Catelyn Stark. So,
wow.
Yeah, I kind of had and then the lady who wrote the screenplay wrote Fried Green Tomatoes and Annie.
That does not surprise me. The Fried Green Tomatoes connection in particular, I didn't know that. So you have gone down a few rabbit holes that I didn't. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me in terms of the tone of this movie and Fried Green Tomatoes.
I mean, it's super earnest, this film.
Yes.
It's just dripping with earnestness, and there's some interest, like we were talking before we started the podcast. This is another we here at Movies, Films, and Flicks love Kurt Russell, and this is a very different Kurt Russell role. I would say the closest one's maybe, what do you think, Breakdown, where he's just a guy driving across country who's dealing with these kind of, I don't know, criminal, I don't know, like cowboys, I guess is the best word for it. And yeah, and then he's just a nice dude.
Yeah, he is. And he's kind of, he's not really meek. I mean, he will speak up for himself, but he's not fearful, but he's also not willing to take unnecessary risks, which is a different Kurt Russell than we typically see in his, more action movies.
He does not hang glide into New York in this.
No, absolutely not.
However, he does jump on top of a bear and shoot it right in the head.
He does. And that is his, prove himself to the mountain folks, or to Gunder, or Gudger. Gudger, in particular. That is his prove himself moment, and Gudger doesn't even really want to let him have that.
That was lame. He wanted to take full credit for it, Gudger. One of Kelly McGillis' brothers. What a lame. Yeah. I did it. Like, no, Kurt Russell jumped on a bear's back. I felt bad for that bear, but it was 1 a year kill. They probably used everything.
Right.
That's when you actually use everything from a hunt. This isn't shooting what like the bison in the prairies for their tongues or rhinos for their horns. So at least I'm sure everything from this bear was used.
Yeah, exactly. And they have some casualties of their own in the process. They lose a dog.
That was sad.
Young. Yeah, it was. And Young gets hurt. Young is pretty much, aside from Collie, Young is another one of Collie's brothers, and is pretty much Waylon's only friend for a good portion of the movie until after the bear hunt.
Because he's kind of a city folk, isn't he?
Yes.
Young kind of travels around the world, and he knows about clocks in England.
In Europe.
Yeah, in Europe, that's the word they use. In Europe. Yeah. Like, where in Europe? Does he ever say where in Europe, or does he just...
He just says Europe. He never says specifically where. So you get the impression he's been around, though. And not only that, he's been away. He's away at the beginning of the movie, because Wayland is already a presence in the town when Young shows up out of nowhere and makes his grand excitable entrance.
They were very excitable in the beginning, were they not? When they're going hunting, when they meet it, they're running. That's exhausting. I would not want to hang out with them, would you?
No, absolutely not. There's a lot of running. There's a lot of whooping. There's some rolling down a hill. If
you did a drinking game with all the whoops in this movie, you'd be pretty schnockered like these guys.
Yes, within 2 minutes.
Yeah, as soon as Young shows up, it's all over.
Yes.
And then so I almost had my Kurt Russell card taken away because I didn't even know that this movie existed. So what kind of led you to pitch it to me? Or, you brought it up, and I'm like, well, let's talk about it. It just sort of happened on Twitter one day. But what kind of led you to pitch this movie? How has this stuck with you?
This movie, it came out in '89, which was the same year that I graduated high school. I had a really, really tough time emotionally transitioning from high school into the broader world, even though my broader world at first was just, going to college, which is an easier transition